Hello and welcome to tonight's edition of Hughes of the World. I'm so sorry. I was very late there getting online. My internet kept on going off. Sorry. Don't blame me. Blame the internet. I will get it sorted. Martin's there saying crankshaft in Graham's internet box is broken again. Anyone got a spare one? Yeah. And Jim Bob Robob says, hi, Gray. Hello, and welcome. So today we are going to be exploring the biggest country in Africa. And this is one of those pub quiz questions where they say, what's the biggest country in Africa? And you say Algeria. And they say, no, it's Sudan. You say, no, Sudan got a third taken off it when South Sudan became an independent country in 2011. So now the biggest country in Africa is Algeria, which is kind of cool. So let's just dive in here. I'm going to bring up the map, the lovely map, which is here for everyone to see. And here's Algeria. I'll zoom out loads so you can see where it is in like the world. So there's good old Africa there. And if we zoom in, you can see nice big letters. I like OpenStreetMap, whatever it's called. It's good, this. There's Algeria there. Now, you'll notice that there's not too many names of places around here. There are various reasons for that. The main one being it's all desert. Up here, you can see actually, which is really brilliant, you can see the names of the places. They are in English. They are in Arabic over here. And in the middle, you see this kind of weird, amazing mashup of maybe Greek and Ethiopian Aramaic language here. These symbols here are the symbols of the Berber people, who are the original inhabitants of Algeria, which I think is super, super cool. I mean, you know, you might have your own opinion about that, but I think it's really cool. So the Berber people are from where we get the name barbarians from, which I'll talk about a bit more later. Now, barber, also you get your barber shop, like your barber from Seville, your barbershop quartet. That also comes to the Berber people, corruption of that perhaps. Barbarossa, the fearsome pirate, the dread pirate Barbarossa, was also from the Barbary coast. And also Barbados, the country thousands of miles away in the Caribbean, is called Barbados because the people there had beards, and it translated kind of to the bearded ones, which is cool. And a little less racist than the name of Papua New Guinea, because Papua meant fuzzy-haired. Yeah, not very nice. Anyway, do you know what Niger means? Can you guess? Also, Melanesia. It's probably, we have these places around the world, and they've got slightly, dodgy names. But they've kept with them. They could have changed them. Like Bombay became Mumbai, and Calcutta became Calcutta, and Madras became Chennai. You don't ask for a chicken Chennai, do you? Well, it sounds good, though. Good alliteration. David says, hi, Algeria. Chris Neal says, hi. And does it have oil or gas? It has oil. Lots of oil. Oil was discovered in the late 60s in Algeria. And it's a member of OPEC. It's one of the founding members of OPEC, I think. Gazrai says, all desert. Yes, all desert. Annie Bell says, hi, Graham. BCA thought, I thought it was the language of Brexit people. No, don't say that. The Berbers are lovely. I'll come to them in a bit. But yeah, like I say, it's Algeria, right? So this country is mostly desert, which is why it's so big. It's got a population of about, 38 million, something like that. It's about the population of Canada, which is another massive country with not that many people living in it. I don't know if people walk around the Sahara Desert going, this place is full. People from other places need to not come here because it's full. But it might be, because there's lots of places in the desert you can't live. Although, if you know what you're doing, like the Tuareg people, who have populated southern Algeria for thousands of years, they know how to live in the desert. They're basically the inspiration behind the people who live on Dune in Frank Herbert's novel Dune. They're the Bedouin of the desert, of the Algerian, the Saharan desert, isn't it? So, but a million years ago, it was lush desert. No, that doesn't work. A million years ago, it was a desert. And then more recently, in geological age, it became like a very green, vast abundance of jungle, basically, which only died out because what happened was we had an ice age. And the ice age only really started receding about 10,000 years ago, 10 years ago. And that's when you saw the desertification of the Sahara Desert. And it didn't become fully desertified like we know it today until about 6,000 years ago, which is when they were building the pyramids. So, there's a connection there. But yeah, it became a desert again because of climate change. See what happens when you change the climate? Things change. And places that were fertile tend to deserts. And places that weren't fertile become fertile. But it only goes so far. I don't think we're going to get much crops growing in Antarctica. Just saying. Anyway, because to grow crops, you need nutrients in the soil. And I don't know if maybe thousands of years of penguin shit will do it. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to bank on it. I thought it was a language. Oh, I read that one. Gluten-free. No one ever says whack, lol. Did I say whack? If they were in the EU and then left, would that be Algexit or Alexit? Well, funny you should say that, Chris Nill, because they used to be part of what became the EU. In fact, in the 1950s, they were part of the European coal and steel community because they were part of France. And Algerians had French citizenship. But I'll come to this. David, please, you seem like a lovely guy, but yeah, my girlfriend watches this and she's reading your messages and she's getting very jealous. So, yeah. Janet Feeney says, hiya, Scouse. All right, Janice, how you doing? Have you been watching the match? I haven't seen any football this year yet. Has there been any football or was it just cancelled? When will you talk about Spain? I think when I get to the S's, which is going to be in about 3 years. So, yeah, hang on in there. I might do it as a Spaniard because then I could do it this year because it'll be under the E's, but I'll probably do it as Spain. I'm going in alphabetical order. So each week, different country. Got material here for 4 years. Is Tuareg where the racist Torag comes from? No, it's not. Torag is like a sock that has just fallen apart and it's no use anymore and it's just a rag on your toes, I think. Isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, so yeah, like I said, it was this amazing cradle of civilization. And you had people who came from Central Africa and to live in what's now Algeria. And then the desert came and most of the people got pushed to the very north of the country to live along the coast. But the Berbers have their own language and they have their own alphabet, which I always love. I always love it when you go somewhere and they not only have their own language, they also have their own alphabet. So places like Burma or Myanmar and Ethiopia, I love the fact that they've got their own language and they've managed to keep it despite everything. And I'm going to come to this actually, because everyone who invaded Algeria pretty much tried to wipe out the Berber language. But we're not successful, which is cool. It's a bit like Welsh, I guess. Anyway, so it started off, yeah, like I said, people just lived there, minding their own business. The first people to kind of invade the place that we know of was the Phoenicians, who came from what's modern day, I don't know, Lebanon, around there. And they were the first people to actually circumnavigate Africa, apparently, which they did in a wooden boat. They couldn't have gone all the way around because the Suez Canal hadn't been built then. But, you know, they got pretty much all the way around, which is quite impressive back in the day. I mean, we're talking like, you know, we're talking like 200 BC. I mean, it's a long time ago. Maybe like a few thousand BC. Yeah, it was actually. It's about 4,000 years ago. Good on you, Phoenicians. Anyway, the Phoenicians stayed there until they founded Carthage. You've all heard of Carthage, haven't you? It's one of the big sort of city-states of the Roman era, along with Athens and Sparta. Was Sparta a city-state? I don't know. It was a place. And Rome, obviously. And Carthage and Rome had a load of wars. And I know Carthage now, today, modern Carthage, you can go and visit it. It's in Tunisia, so it's not in Algeria, but those modern borders hadn't been put there yet. They will come later. But yeah, anyway, so the Romans fought the Carthaginians. I think Hannibal was from Carthage, wasn't he? Didn't he take some elephants over the Alps, famously, brilliantly? And then eventually, after the Third Punic War, Carthage fell. And at that stage, the Romans basically overruled all of the sort of the states along the coast, which now become part of Algeria that we sort of know and love. Shane Lismore says, for some reason, the name of the country sounds like it was made to be said in Algeria. There used to be Musons in the Sahara, no Musons in India, and sometime in the future it will switch again. I don't know what they are. You're going to have to explain that a bit more. Gaz says Algiers is an interesting city. It certainly is. Luckily, the desert has now stopped spreading. Has it, Thomas Page? I thought the desertification of places in Mali and Burkina Faso are a huge issue at the moment. Don't Spain have an overseas territory in Africa next to Algeria or Morocco? It has two. It has Ceuta and Medellin or something. I've forgotten the name. But they're both surrounded by Morocco, so they're not actually in Algeria. Graham, can we do a vlog on empires, the little known ones? Yeah, that'd be boss. The Abyssinian Empire. That was a fantastic one. With its capital in Gondor, which is out of Lord of the Rings, in what's now northern Ethiopia. And they actually have medieval castles there, which are just fantastic. It's really cool. So anyway, so the Roman era came, and eventually the Romans all converted to Christianity. And there's a very famous saint in Christianity called Saint Augustine. And he was born in what's now, today, Algeria. However, he was killed by the Vandals. The Vandals turned up and vandalized everything. It's very funny, not funny, but it's kind of interesting the way language develops. We get barbarians from the Berbers, from basically the pirates, the corsairs that used to run riot around the Mediterranean. And we get Vandals, bloody Vandals. That comes from the tribe that eventually led to the downfall of Rome. I mean, they took over Rome. They didn't take any prisoners. They weren't very good at governing, though. They were good at conquering, not so good at governing, which meant that the empire didn't last very long, if you can call it an empire. And then you've got hooligans. So you know when you call people hooligans, which is a great British word that we like to use when someone kicks over some dustbins. If you like Bill Hicks, another Bill Hicks joke there. That comes from the hooligan, not the hooligans, the hooligans or the hooligans, as in an Irish surname. It was a family of Irish people who are renowned for causing a bit of trouble. And so, yeah, a lot of the words we use to describe people that we don't like, Vandals, hooligans, barbarians, basically foreigners. Xenophobia has been around for a very long time. So anyway, the Vandals, and then the Byzantines said, "Oi, piss off." So they did, and the Byzantines struck back. And after about, 100 years of Vandal rule, the Byzantines took over. And then the Dothraki turned up. Not the Dothraki, sorry, the Arab horsemen. Same thing. And they took over. And by, what is it, 1898, Byzantine was gone from the Maghreb. So if you want to know what the Maghreb is, that's basically the Sahara Desert. It's that area of northern Africa. You can call it the Maghreb. It's all where the desert bits are. It's generally called the Maghreb. And by then, the Arabs had got rid of them. And there was by 712. Getting far ahead of myself here. By 712, pretty much like the whole of that southern coast of the Mediterranean, from Andalusia in Spain, all the way to the Levant in the Middle East, was all ruled over by Damascus, the capital of Syria. It's amazing. And they basically, the religion stayed. Actually, they went back and forth a little bit between Shiite and Sunni, but it stayed a Muslim country, no matter what. Islamic rule moved from Damascus to Baghdad. Algeria broke away. A dynasty took over, which was a local dynasty called the Rustamid. I'm probably saying that wrong. Rustamid dynasty. And they were, this is about the year 900, and they were fantastic. They were very famous for their enlightenment, well, not enlightenment, but their enlightened ways, and huge strides forward in mathematics, astronomy, and the arts. Now, something that's quite interesting about Islamic art is that they weren't allowed, because there are quite strict rules about iconography, they weren't allowed to draw people or even animals. You see, because the golden calf, I guess. You don't worship things, worship God or Allah. And as a result, most Islamic art is, and this runs from, you know, the Alhambra, Alhambra Palace in Granada, all the way to the Taj Mahal in Agra in India. You see geometric forms and beautiful calligraphy, because they were allowed to do that. That's how they did their art. It became these beautiful patterns and mosaics and things like that. And that's a hallmark of Islamic art. And it's because they were told not to do pictures of people. True story. It's not just Muhammad that you shouldn't draw a cartoon of. It's like anyone. Graham, do you like fellow Graham Hancock? Who's Graham Hancock? I don't know who Graham Hancock is. You'll have to introduce me. Well, a Houlihan. Wes Houlihan, great player for Norwich on the Port City. The French and others have made some awesome movies in Algeria. Yeah, The Battle for Algiers. Scored by Ennio Morricone. Fantastic score. Well, I'm going to come to that. The Vandals took the handle. Bob Dylan. Shane Lismore says, my friend grew up in Beaumerd and said there were massive sociological problems, opportunist murders and terrorism, etc. following the 2003 earthquake there. Yeah, Algeria is still not a particularly stable country, although I'm still like 1,000 years out at the moment. Anyway, you know how it goes when you have a nice enlightened government who aren't corrupt and actually do things that help the people of the society. Yeah, they forget to set up a standing army, which is what the Russamid dynasty did, and they got taken over by Cairo. I think it was Cairo who came along, and the Berber Zivids. They were a group that were allied to Cairo, and basically they took over and founded Algiers, which is now the capital of Algeria. They pissed off the Egyptians. So I got that wrong around. They weren't working for them. They pissed off the Egyptians because they converted got people to convert from Sunni to Shiite. And I think the Cairo lot was Sunni. So the Cairo lot were like, oi, what are you doing? So they came over, had a bit more fight. This fighting went on for a long time. And then we had another massive empire of the Almoravids, and they ruled from Spain again. Spain was Moorish, wasn't it, in the south, all the way down to Senegal in the south. I'm going to get the map up. Let's get the map up again. I like getting the map up. This is cool. Okay, so there's the map there. So if you have a look where Senegal is there, and then you had what's Mauritania now, Algeria. Went into Libya, went to Morocco, and went up into sort of southern Spain around here, which is, again, I think is pretty cool. I mean, they had a massive empire back in the day. And when that split up, it split into three. And essentially, what we now know of as Morocco and Algeria and Libya were founded at that time. The borders have moved a bit, left and right, but generally speaking, those three big uns were all put out there when this dynasty collapsed in 1160, I think. 1160, I'll have to look into that. Anyway, so things spluttered along as things often do, but the big next thing that happened was in 1492, and it wasn't Columbus sailing the ocean blue. The women in Spain are very Moorish. Ha 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 ha, Jim Bob. Very good. Very droll. 1492 was famous because Queen Isabella of Spain and Aragon, sorry, and Ferdinand and Isabella, they unified the two regions that now became known as Spain, and they basically ran all Muslims and Jews out of the country in 1492. And then they started attacking what's now Algeria, all along the coast. And so we had a huge era of piracy. And I love this bit. This is my favourite bit. So the dread pirate Barbarossa, Redbeard the pirate. It might be a corruption of his name, Baba Abjel or something. But Barbarossa was famous. He ran this massive protection racket. And that's what it was. It was a protection racket. Generally speaking, the pirates left you alone if you paid the money. So you had to put up a flag on your ship to show that you were from a city-state or from a country or from a trading company that had paid the Barbary pirates off, the corsairs off, and you didn't get pirated. If you did get pirated, you got your stuff robbed. And bloody hell, they robbed a lot of stuff. It's kind of a really interesting part of European history or Mediterranean history, I should say. But this, like British privateers, like Drake and Raleigh and Captain Morgan, for Christ's sake, these people they ended up working for the man. They always end up working for the man, don't they? And what Barbarossa did is he allied himself with the Ottomans in Turkey against the Spanish. And he also, just protection racket, being ruthless. But he managed to kick the Spanish out of Algiers. And in recognition of his efforts, of his, kicking the Spanish out ways, he was made governor of Algiers. So a pirate was made, it gets better, a pirate was made governor of Algiers. And then he was so good at his job that he was invited to go to modern-day Turkey to meet with the Sultan, the Emir, I don't know what they were called, the leader of the Ottoman Empire, who put him in charge of the Ottoman Navy. So he was the admiral of the fleet. That is one hell of a job promotion, isn't it? That's like the guy from Catch Me If You Can who starts off and he's robbing stuff and he's forging everything and he ends up working for the FBI. Yeah, a bit like that. Barbarossa is a real person. Yes, very important historical person, actually. As a Brit, I'm against piracy. So, where was I? I was talking about the Barbary pirates. They operated out of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli in Libya. And basically, they all worked together, kind of pretty much. And it was a solid operation. It really was. And don't forget, if they gave you protection, they would stop other pirates from attacking you as well. That was a good way of making money. So things went on like that for a little while until, I guess the next big thing would be the French invasion of 1830. So in 1830, the French had a king for like a week called Charles Xavier, Charles X of France. Did I say France? I hope I said France. So France basically had this king, and I can't remember. I need to get a refresher course. It's not in me Lonely Planet. If someone looks this up, that'd be great. But the pretext for attacking Algeria was a slight. I don't know what it was. They made fun of someone's wife or something, and because of this slight, they might have murdered someone. I don't know. Because of this slight, the good people of France decided that they would invade. And they did. And it was horrific. It was absolutely effing horrific. Let me look at the stats here. We got 1830. They blockaded and attacked Algiers. They wreaked havoc. They killed. They raped thousands of people. And worse, in some ways, they desecrated mosques and cemeteries. So it's that thing of like, it's not bad enough that we're going to ruin your life, we're also going to ruin your death as well. They really did a number. They looted over 50 million francs in those days, so that's billions today, from the treasury in Algiers. And even though Charles X was like literally overthrown a few weeks later, So whatever the slight was, whatever this excuse to go and invade Algeria was, it went with Charles X. It died with Charles X being king, and France was made a democracy once again. Liberty, fraternity, equality. Yeah, right. Not for the people of Algeria. The people of Algeria were led under something called the régime de sabre, as in the rule of the sword. And it was absolutely brutal what the French did. The French forces did in Algeria. By just 7 years later, over 1/3 of the entire French army was on Algerian soil. 1/3 of the army in Algeria. And this is before oil was found. I don't know what they were hoping for. Do you know what I mean? This is like, let's take this place. We've got to take this place. Why? I don't know. It's got loads of sand and it looked good on a map when we got it. And it'll look like we've got this big country. And everyone will love that. That'll be great. I think I'm getting some internet problems here because I haven't got any more messages. And I've got a yellow signal. So it shows that I'm just not doing okay. If you can hear me out there in the real world, just give me a nod so I know that actually I'm still broadcasting what I'm saying, because I don't want to have to say all this again. It's a bit rubbish when you have to do that. Let me just check. Sorry about this, everyone. Oh, I got a new message. There you go. French Foreign Legion. Yeah. Thank you, Jim Bob. Let me know that I wasn't alone. Yeah, the French Foreign Legion, which famously ran around the desert causing havoc. By 1840, there's so many troops over there. 7 years later, basically the entire north of Algeria had been overrun. Abdelkader put up a good fight. He got exiled to Damascus. He was like the local leader of a huge area of what's now Algeria and Morocco for that matter. And he managed to, he went to prison at first, but then he managed to get out of jail because he only went to jail because someone was pissed off with him for having his fort. One of the French officers was pissed because his army had just been so roundly defeated by this guy. But a few years later, eventually the guy got defeated. And he got put into exile in Damascus. And interestingly enough, Abdul Kader, he got there and he averted a planned massacre of 12,000 Christians in Syria. 12,000 Christians were going to be killed by the Ottomans, and he averted it. He saved 12,000 lives of people who were Christian, and he was Muslim. And the Christians basically overrun his country and sent him into exile, and he still did that. What a top bloke. I wouldn't have done that. I don't think. Oh, come on, though. 12,000. That's quite a lot. 1871, last outposts of rebellion. The last outposts of rebellion were finally subdued. And the country was taken, pretty much, except for the Tuaregs in the south of the country, because they were nomads who had lived in the desert for years. And as I talked about when I was talking about Afghanistan, if you know the territory and you're fighting against people who don't, it's going to be an uphill struggle. And it was a good 25 years or something before France finally could say that it had subdued the Tuareg population. There's small numbers of people, but obviously absolutely knew what they were doing when it came to living in the Sahara Desert and how to keep fighting. I'm getting messages going, I can hear you now, I can hear you. Good. Maybe my picture's frozen, but I'm still here. You can still hear me. Anyway, so let's talk a bit about the French occupation from then on. I mean, you've got a situation where it wasn't just, they call it colonization. It's the era of colonization. In 1885, it's this great scramble for Africa in which all of these not very nice European powers, Britain, Belgium, France, Netherlands, all had this scramble for Africa, Germany. And they carved Africa up into all these different countries, places that hadn't really been countries before. They cut tribes apart, like the same peoples. The good example of that is if you look at the map, you'll see. Actually, I'll bring the map up since I can do that. I have the power. It's great. This is like the worst PowerPoint presentation ever. Aren't you glad I'm not doing this on PowerPoint? Go on, say that you are. Say that you are. So there's the map there. And if I just show you down Senegal, like, can you see Senegal there? Can you see it's shaped a little bit like a face with a nose there and then a mouth that goes here, right? And this is Gambia. This is the tongue that makes Senegal speak. Now, Senegal and Gambia were one group of people. There was one group who all spoke the same language, who all hung out in this area. And then basically the French took over Senegal and the Gambia was taken over by the British, and they were divided, and they remain divided today. Even though their basic language is the same, their official languages are English and French. And that's the kind of thing we did. And also, we put tribes who really, really hated each other together in the one country and went, hey, all learn to live together in harmony. And they're like, but we hate those other people. And like, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. And it was divide and conquer. And so you got situations like you've got today where Nigeria, the north of Nigeria is mostly Muslim, south of Nigeria is mostly Christian, and they vote in elections along those lines. They don't vote for who the best person is. They vote for the Christians vote for who the Christian is, and the Muslims vote for who the Muslim is. So not great for moving forwards. Kind regards in Poland from the 27 Bike Brothers. There's 27 people watching. So anyway, when the French really went in, they went into Algeria, they went in hard. Local culture was actively eliminated. The Casbahs, the Medinas, the markets, the old streets and stuff were replaced with grids, French grids. Again, horribly, mosques were converted into churches. So there was a cathedral. Well, there was a grand mosque in Algiers. I'm going to try and say it. It was the Jema el Kabar, Kabir, I think, and that became the Cathedral of Saint Philip. This was the era of the Pieds Noirs, the Blackfoots, which is what they called European settlers there, and it was exploitative and repressive. Muslims became bystanders in their own country. They had taxation, no representation. They were treated like they were second-class citizens in their own country. It was the kind of shit that you wouldn't put up with. No one would put up with this anywhere in the world. And obviously, eventually, people really started standing up and saying, we don't want this anymore. Algerians were imprisoned without trial. The school system for Algerian children pretty much collapsed. They said they were on a civilizing mission. They wanted people to not speak Berber anymore. They wanted to eliminate the language. They wanted everyone to speak French. They wanted everyone to convert to Catholicism. And look, I'm saying all this, right? I'm not having a dig at the French now, okay? The British did arguably worse things in their daft colonial exploits around the world, which were not civilizing missions. They weren't. They were there to just plunder what resources these places had. That's why the British Museum is full of stuff from other countries that we nicked. I mean, we don't bother asking, do you want this stuff back? We did take it. I know it's yours. Strategically, it would have given France closer to the Straits of Gibraltar so they could possibly control access to the Med. Yeah, that's interesting. But again, it's one of those things where you kind of like, you go, well, what's the best way of sorting this out? Well, we'll take Gibraltar. Gibraltar's very, very hard to take, obviously, being a rock. You've got the higher position. You're shooting down at ships. Come on. Gravity does half the work for you. Maybe if they managed to take Gibraltar from the British, that would have saved them all the hassle of governing Algeria to the detriment of Algerians for many years. But there were calls for independence, and in 1937 there was a party the People's Party of Algeria was formed, and a couple of years later, an uprising near a place called Sétif led to 100 Europeans being massacred. 100, which is horrific. In response, the French killed 45,000 Muslims. Okay, so 100 Europeans equals 45,000 Muslims. I mean, it was a bloodbath, absolute bloodbath. And by 1947, all this talk about after the war, we just toppled Hitler and his regime, we just went around massacring people. Sound familiar, anyone? It was a bit rich of the French. Liberty, fraternity, equality. And you're like, but what about Algeria? So, in 1947, Charles de Gaulle said, okay, right, we're going to give you full French citizenship. So everyone who was a Muslim in Algeria, and everyone who was a Pied Noir had it anyway, became French citizens. So they got sort of representation in the nation, but things were still being run from Paris. They weren't being run necessarily from Algiers. And it's very hard. This is one of the problems that they have in modern day Indonesia, where you have a place like West Papua, which historically wasn't part of Dutch Indonesia. It wasn't. It was separate. Right, I know it was Dutch as well, but it was a separate thing. The people there are very different. They aren't Muslims, and I know the people of Bali are Hindu, but I'm just talking about West Papua here. West Papua, it's half of the island of New Guinea, and basically the people who live there don't look like people from Indonesia. They don't sound like people from Indonesia. They don't behave like people from Indonesia, and they don't have the same religion as people or culture or anything like that. And so trying to rule them from Jakarta, 1,000 miles away on a distant island is crazy. And if you want to try and run an empire that reaches all the way from Calais all the way down to almost Timbuktu, literally, that's in Mali, but just over the border. And this is where you go, oh bloody hell, this isn't going to work, and it didn't. And as things went on, the country descended into war. In 1954, the National Liberation Front, or the FLN, started attacking French government installations, and the Algerian War of Independence began. Independence was supported by its neighbours, was supported by Morocco, by Tunisia, which were former French protectorates, and by Egypt. In response to this, the French did what any civilized nation would do and built a wall. Well, they didn't. They built a wire fence. They built a wire fence between Algeria and its neighbours. You can still see parts of this fence. It's just a barbed wire fence. It ran for over 100 kilometres along the border with Morocco. And there was brutality on both sides, collective punishment on both sides. 2 million Muslims were forcibly resettled. We go on about Stalin forcibly resettling people in the Soviet Union. Well, the French did that in Algeria in the 1950s. But by the end of the war, by the end of the decade, by the end of the 1950s, it was really becoming untenable. Algiers had been taken over by the Algerian forces. They only managed to get it back. The French managed to get it back in 1959. But by then, so many countries were just going, what are you doing, France? What are you doing? And obviously decolonization was happening. India had independence. All these countries around Africa had independence by then. The world was decolonizing. America was putting a lot of pressure on these European powers to let these countries, have self-determination. And so negotiations with the FLN began in 1961. And a year later, they had a referendum. Now, I don't like referendums usually because I always feel like if it's nearly 50-50, it's a bit unfair on the 50% of the people who didn't want this thing. Well, in this referendum for independence, it was 6 million for, and 16,000 against. So I got my numbers here to make sure I'm right. 16,000 against. That's 0.26%. People wanted to stay with France. Yeah, that's pretty emphatic. So they got independence. But the war had taken a terrible toll. Over 1 million Algerians had died in the war. 18,000 French soldiers and 10,000 European civilians. The first leader of the newly independent Algeria was a guy called Ahmed Ben Bella. He was overthrown a few years later by Boumediene, who was a secular leader. He was quite determined. He was of the Nasser of Egypt kind of school of thought. He was a nationalist. He knew that the economy needed rebuilding. Oil was found, as I just mentioned, in the 60s. They became part of OPEC. That buoyed up the economy, which obviously was reeling after the war. Unfortunately, Boumediene died in, I'm sorry, I hope I'm saying his name right. Sorry if I'm not, French speakers. The National Liberation Front splitters. Bring back the Romans. What have they ever done for us? Basically, Boumediene died in 1978, and a guy called Chadli took over. Chadli? This is how I pronounce it. Anyway, so Chadli took over, and around that time, we started seeing Islamists. You call them radical Islamists or very religious people, fundamentalists. You find out a lot of religious fundamentalists concentrate on the being mental bit rather than the being fun bit too often. And they started agitating. That led to a police crackdown. The government got more Islamist in its outlook, less secular. Women lost rights. Family laws came in, protecting the family. Stanley Beckett says, didn't realise so many Algerians died in the war. Yeah, I mean, these atrocities of the 20th century are just mind-blowing when you go back through them and you go, bloody hell, that actually happened within living memory, and we just carry on like nothing happened. And a lot of these countries, we saddled with loads of debt. Actually, I think Algeria's debt was from the Soviet Union, and Putin, in one of his only moments where he did something all right in his entire presidency, I think he was prime minister at the time, he wrote off the debt for Algeria. The Soviet Union interfered in Africa in the 20th century, arguably just as much as the Western powers interfered as well. It was all that thing of battle of hearts and minds and get people over to the communist cause, and we wanted to get people over to the democratic cause and all this. Don't forget, famous poster boy of sociology students, I guess, Che Guevara. He fought in Congo. He invaded Congo, like Cuba invaded Congo. What was that all about? You have to wait till I get to the seas before I start talking about that. It's the government's fault, not mine. Purchase the software to do it or outsource. What? Brexit people about the Welsh wine merchant from Twitter. I have 4 years to prepare. I left it till 6 months beforehand. I planned poorly. But this isn't about this. This is about Algeria. Just talk about Algeria. I keep going the wrong side because I see the mirror image. Algeria. I'm not talking about Brexit. Anyway, so just talking a bit more about what happened after sort of the 80s saw this increase in Islamicism in Algeria, and riots broke out in 1988. And then they had multi-party elections for the first time in 1991, and everything soon after went to shit. Chadli stood down. There was a military takeover. There was a new leader who was assassinated a couple of months later. By 1994, they were at war again. So Algeria descended for the second time in the 20th century into a very brutal conflict. And 1994, they were seeing about 400 people killed every week. And now, with COVID, I'm just going to date this video somewhat, but that seems not that much, doesn't it? That seems not that much now. But 400 dead people a week, yeah, that should be shocking. The fact that it's not shocking these days because of COVID is pretty shocking. Anyway, in 1999, the elections were won by a guy called Abdulaziz, I'm going to say Bouteflika, who he presided over the end of the war. No one seems to know when the war actually ended. No one's got a specific date because there were so many little militia groups. There was these groups called, there was the Movement Islamic Army, which is MIA, and then there was the Group Islamic Army, which is the GIA. And you had all these different factions, and eventually it fizzled out by 2002. And this was the phenomenon that we saw all over Africa, actually. Around the year 2002, a lot of wars, civil wars that were raging in Africa at the time, kind of just fizzled out. And there weren't too many of these insurgent groups. The ones that were left had been defeated, or had the government had given them amnesty, so they'd taken the amnesty and laid down their arms. The few that still went on fighting even after 2002. There were deep scars in society. One of the last Islamic groups was the GSPC, which I'm going to come back to in a moment because it's obviously got links with what happened next. But I just want to point out there was another referendum in 2005, and it was for the Civil Harmony Act. Isn't that a lovely name for an act? A Civil Harmony Act, which was just basically that everyone should all get along, I think. And 97% of people in Algeria voted for that. That's emphatic. I'll go with that. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't quibble about that one. Anyway, so what happened was GSPC, this militant group that sort of formed it during the Civil War of the late 90s, it allied itself with Al-Qaeda. And in 2011, after the Arab Spring, the state of emergency in Algeria, which had been declared like 2 decades earlier, was finally lifted. But just a couple of years later, with the rise of sort of Al-Qaeda in Africa, ISIS, all that nonsense, there was a hostage crisis in a remote gas plant called, I think the place is called Anamas, I think that's the name of the place, and 23 people were quite brutally killed after a 2-day siege. That was in 2013. But aside from that, Algeria seemed to ride this whole this whole horrible business with Al-Qaeda, with ISIS, with Boko Haram fighting in killing people in Nigeria, and what the Islamists in Burkina Faso and Mali. The attack on Mali was just horrific. A lot of ancient mud palaces were just destroyed. These historical artifacts, a lot of graves were desecrated by these lunatics. But Algeria, by and large, got out unscathed. So that's it, really. I mean, taken up to 2019, and Bouteflika, he resigned. He tried to stand for the presidency for the 5th time, and everyone told him to piss off. And the current president is a guy called Abdelmejid Tebboune. Tebboune is now president. But Algeria is still not out the woods. Pro-democracy campaigners are frequently imprisoned. The Human Rights Watch says it's not a free country. The state is very oppressive. There's no gay rights. In fact, if you're caught doing gay things in public, it's a 2-year jail sentence or 2. They have a lot of infrastructure projects that have come into fruition since the war, since the Second War. They now have roads that run all the way from the top to the bottom of the country, right through the desert, which is a remarkable feat of engineering. Also, oil pipelines, obviously. And Algeria now, I mean, wow, that's taking me up. That's taking me up to that's 50 minutes. I've already talked about the history. Bloody hell. All these other people on YouTube, they go, I'm going to talk about a country, and they give you all the facts in like 5 seconds. So, Algeria, the capital is Algiers. The population's about 38 million. The people who live there are descendants of the Tuareg and the Berbers, who've lived there for many, many years. The food there is fantastic. The food there is a mix of sort of Arab food, because that influence coming over. So you're thinking kebabs and koftas and stuff like that. No, that's Greek, sorry. But it's got this huge French influence. So the food there is really, really good. If you're a bit of a foodie, Algeria, it should be coming back on the map. Bouteflika hated nose pickers. Hey, don't collide with Max. Sorry, the dude. Is Max on at the moment? Yeah, he is. He starts at half 9. I'm thinking of moving this show because it's a bit stressed doing two live shows a day on a Tuesday, because obviously I do the Brexit reality Hughes round at 1 o'clock. But yeah, talk a little bit more about Algeria. I went there in 2010. I tried to get there in 2009. Couldn't get in for love nor money. And I offered both because I needed to get a visa, and I couldn't get a visa in the country, in Tunisia, where I was. I also tried to get into Libya in 2009 as well, and it was just interdit. There's a chapter about it in my book. It's called Interdit. Couldn't get into either country, so eventually the year after, I returned to the United Kingdom overland, picked up a couple of visas from London, headed back to Tunisia, and then visited Libya and Algeria. And I was met with a very welcoming response when I went there. I wasn't... Again, it's one of these countries where people say, oh, it could be dangerous, still insurgency and stuff like that. But when I was there, everyone was super friendly to me. And something phenomenon that happens a lot when you go to places like these is people don't want to see you hurt. So they'll go out the way to say, don't go that way, don't hurt people, don't go this way. Adam says, obviously, even before the Odyssey, you were better travelled than most, but how much did you know about travelling around the place before you started? That's a good question, Adam. I knew Europe like the back of my hand. I travelled a lot around Europe since I was a kid. I knew Southeast Asia. I knew China pretty good. I knew India very well. I travelled all around India. South America, I knew very well. And Australia, New Zealand, I knew very well. As for the places that I could say Central America. I'd never been to Central America before. I did the Odyssey, but it's very similar to South America, so it wasn't that much of a culture shock. The Caribbean, I've never been to any of the islands in the Caribbean, but I knew kind of what to expect there. The big unknowns for me when I was traveling, I'd always traveled around the Middle East as well. Well, I traveled to Egypt. I'd traveled around from Egypt to Turkey. So I'd already been to Jordan. I had been to Lebanon. I had been to Syria and Turkey. Yeah. So I knew that area. So I think I'd got enough of those places to get a feel for the area. But the big unknown for me for Africa was Africa. At that time, I'd only been to Egypt and Morocco. That was it. So going into Africa was sort of going into the big unknown for me. And it was an incredible experience. It was harder than I thought it would be, but also in some weird ways it was easier than I thought it would be. And I never felt particularly in danger. I never felt like I was on my own. I was my backpacker, and that was it. But I never really felt, except a couple of run-ins with the law, I guess. But the people were just so friendly, and they just didn't want me to get into trouble because it reflects badly on their country, I guess. If you But Algeria to this day, something I need to discuss. God, 3 minutes left. I was a bit late starting, wasn't I? So let's leave it for a couple of... let's give a few more minutes. The relationship with its neighbours. Now, Algeria, if Algeria plays Egypt in the football, oh my God, there's like proper riots. I don't know what that is all about, whether it goes back 1,000 years to when Cairo wasn't happy with Algeria changing its religion for a few years and then changing it back. But the border with Morocco is well and truly closed. You can't get over from Algeria to Morocco, which is a bit frustrating if you're a bit like me and you look at maps and you go, wouldn't it be great to do a lap of Africa? I'll do a lap of Africa. You go down the coast, go down the west coast, and then up the east in an electric car. Let's do it in an electric car. Yeah, it'd be amazing. And obviously you can't go through Somalia, but that's fine. You cut the corner off, go up through Sudan, through Egypt, that's the horn. That sticks out a little bit. So that's understandable. But then you get all the way up to Algeria. You drive from Egypt into Libya, into Tunisia, and then into Algeria. And you try and get into Morocco, which arguably would be a good place to start this journey because you'll come on the car ferry from Spain. You just hit a brick wall. Well, not a brick wall, but a barbed wire fence that won't let you through because the border is closed. Why is the border closed? Well, because of Western Sahara, which I'm not going to get to for about 4 years on these shows. So in 4 years' time, I will tell you all about Western Sahara. But until then, no. So Western Sahara is the bottom half of what's now Morocco, de facto Morocco. Again, let's bring up the map. Oh, I can't bring up the map. Where has the map gone? The map has disappeared. Well, that's no good. Well, I was going to show you the map, but I can't. Oh, do you know what it is? It's probably because... Let's have a look. It's probably because I went offline. Oh, there it is. Excellent. Good stuff. Okay, right. I'm going to bring the map back, everybody. I've got a little map for you. Channeling a bit of Bob Ross there. This beautiful little map, this cute little map, isn't it lovely? So if I zoom out a little bit, you can see there, this is Morocco, okay? But Laayoune and Dakhla down here are actually part of this is Western Sahara. Here's Algeria here. I'm going to just zoom in so you can see a little bit more. There should be a border across here, and there isn't one. But it does say Western Sahara, but it doesn't actually have a border between these two parts of Morocco. By the way, Berber, as you can see here in Morocco, is an official language of Morocco. In Algeria, it's only a national language, but in Morocco, it's an official language. Anyway, so Western Sahara, you see this line here, this weird little line that sort of goes along here. This area of Western Sahara is held by the Western Saharans, pretty much. Whereas this is all run by Morocco, and obviously they've got access to the coast and everything. And then you've got this like weird bit of no man's land between Western Sahara and, well, you know, the Moroccan part of Western Sahara and Mauritania. This is where the border is to get through to head down to Nouakchott, which is the capital of Mauritania. So over here, where my little hand is, if I zoom in, see Tindouf over here. This is Tindouf. That is the refugee camp where there are thousands of Western Saharan people who are still living there after many, many years because they were kicked out the country, basically, in about, I don't know, 1975, I want to say, is when the Spanish left Western Sahara. So Morocco was a French protectorate, Western Sahara was Spanish. They pulled out in about 1975, around there, and then a few years later, Morocco, Algeria, and Mauritania will fought each other over who would have control of Western Sahara, which is a bit unfair on the whole Western Saharans, who, when I was there, just said they wanted to be left alone and do their own thing. The UN went in about 1982, and they set up a thing. So they had a 3-stage plan. One was to keep the peace, which has done quite a good job of, actually. The second one was to do a census to find out who could vote in a referendum. And the third one was to just do an independence referendum. And they've only done the first one. And that was like nearly 40 years ago. So, yeah, good job, UN. You're really kicking it there. Woo! But as a result, relations between Morocco and Algeria still haven't thawed. And Morocco has only recently admitted to the African Union. Morocco being the Switzerland of Africa in a way, because Switzerland only became part of the United Nations in about 2002. It didn't want to be part of the club. No, I don't want to be part of the silly club. It's full of silly people. It's rubbish. And eventually they just became part of the UN because everybody else was. Meanwhile, Morocco held off or was blocked from being part of the African Union and eventually joined a few years ago. Anyway, so I've still got loads to talk about Algeria, but I have gone over my time, and I think I'm going to wrap it up there. This is amazing. I thought that I'd finish the history in about 20 minutes, and then I can talk about the culture. I mean, Algeria, like Egypt, if you had gone there in the 80s, you would have seen women walking around without the headdresses on, and you would have seen women in bikinis on the beaches and things. And then in the 80s, these Islamists took hold in public office, but also in the civil service, in the police, in the military. And as a result, women's rights became oppressed, and now women have to completely cover up in these countries. So in some ways, they went quite liberal and secular. Like, you know, you had, like I said, Nasser in Egypt, but even going back further than that, Ataturk in Turkey in the 1920s made sure that the country was became more secular. In fact, to this day, it's still illegal to wear a full head covering in Turkey in a federal building or a government building, I think a public building. Nice one, Graham. Like Open University for working class posse. Thanks, buddy. I'm not really working class, you know. I'm very, very middle class. I'm just lower middle class, I'll say. Time for more exit. Yeah. No, they're part of the African Union now, so you know they're enjoying it, being part of the club once again. And the African Union, if they got their SHIT together, it could be a real force for good. It could be a force for good in Africa. It could be. They have everything we need to make our modern world. Africa has stuff that we really, really need. The big thing is coltan, which I'll come on to a lot when I'm talking about the Congos. Coltan is in every single bit of computer, phone, camera technology that you've got. Coltan is like the spice of planet Earth at the moment, and most of the world's reserves of it are in the middle of Africa. Enjoyed this. Looking forward to Zimbabwe in 2025. Yes. I'm just hoping that no countries change their names. Like Swaziland became Eswatini, didn't it? And yeah, I'm just hoping no one else changes their name in the next 4 years, because that makes things very complicated. And also, Bougainville in Papua New Guinea had an independence referendum last year to which they voted for independence. And if they get independence, then I might have to go back and do B again if I've gone past that point. Also, I might have to go back to Papua New Guinea. I have to go back to Bougainville because I didn't visit it on the Odyssey expedition, and it'll be another country. So I can't say I've been to every country in the world without flying, without going to Bougainville, which would make a great adventure, because trying to get from Liverpool to Bougainville without flying would be an adventure in itself. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me. I've been Graham Hughes. This has been Hughes of the World. I will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock for Brexit Reality. Well, I'm just going to go on about Brexit. I like this because I get to talk about something other than bloody Brexit. But I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be talking about Trump's last day in office, and we'll be talking about Biden's inauguration, although at 1 o'clock our time he won't be inaugurated yet, but we're getting to it. I'll look into moving the time of Hughes of the World maybe to Wednesday or Thursday in order to facilitate the fact that I don't want to tread on Max's toes because I know his show starts at 9:30 on Tuesday, so I might move this to Thursdays. I will gauge your opinion if you want to let me know in the comments today or tomorrow what you feel about that. I'm up for suggestions, but yeah, I could move it to Thursday. And while lockdown's still going on, it's not like I'm going to be going anywhere. So until next time, I will say fair winds, travel.